The second episode of the True Detective Night Country starts with a bang under Isa Lopez's direction. It's a total mind-bender with a solid mix of dark humor and creep show vibes, thanks to Alaska's nigh endless night. In the first episode, Chief Detective Liz Danvers, along with Trooper Navarro and the Ennis police squad, stumble upon this massive ice block with 8 scientists frozen inside. That's your corpsicle, the term that Jodie Foster's character uses to describe this frozen mess. It's a twisted kind of funny at first glance, but then you see the horror etched on the scientists' faces, and that's when things get real. Even though the local cops mess around with it, Danvers knows there's something way darker going on, and the episode establishes that Season 4 is directly linked to Season 1, and more specifically to Matthew McConaughey's character from Season 1. The second episode dives deep into the investigation, and you can bet things are about to get even crazier. So without further ado, let's get straight into the story and answer one of the hottest questions that were left in its wake.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
What was really up with the scientists? As the episode kicks off, we see the cops haven't made much headway in prying the scientists out of the frozen wasteland. They're recently brushing off snow from the bodies like they're dealing with ancient fossils, not real people who've met a grisly end. Danvers insists that they do not mess up the soft tissues of the bodies, and of course, these aren't pretty scenes. We're talking blood-stained faces and some seriously messed up injuries on naked corpses entangled with each other, as if they were trying to climb up on top of one another before they die. Pete and Liz are deep in documenting this horror show and discover ruptured eardrums, burnt-out eyes, and even missing fingers. Ruptured eardrums could be a cause of pressure difference, while the burned corneas seem to have happened due to icebergs. Yep, that's a real thing. Meanwhile, the rest of the Ennis PD crew was busy snapping tasteless selfies with the corpses, so there's a risk that the local cops might prove to be a PR disaster. In what can be described as a purely Night County-esque scene, a cop accidentally snaps off a frozen arm from one of the bodies, and it's somehow the lightest moment in this whole episode. How? Well, the arm belonged to Dr. Lund, and he was not dead. Dr. Lund, the boss from Salal, suddenly starts screaming his lungs out from his icy grave. His mouth is black as night. Later, we find out he's in a coma, and they're about to chop off his leg. If there's any clue about what went down that icy night, Dr. Lund's the guy to spill the beans. On the sidelines, Evangeline was watching all this unfold and stumbles upon neatly folded piles of men's clothes like they were planning to come back for them. Also present on the scene was Rose, who asks Evangeline Navarro to catch up later. Now, Rose was the woman who was guided by the specter of a man named Travis to the location where the corpsicles were found. Season 2 connects to Season 1. In a small but juicy scene, Rose gets frank and nostalgic with Navarro about her spooky visions of Travis. She even tries to break down why the folks in Ennis are catching glimpses of the dearly departed. While they're chatting about Travis's last drop-in, Rose calls him Travis Cole. Yeah, that's Rust's dad from the first season of True Detective, who they said lived up in Alaska. Now, considering Rust had his own knack for seeing stuff that's way out there and beyond what most of us can't grasp, it's not a stretch to think this old man Travis has a similar thing going on. He's crossing over from the afterlife to have a word with Rose, blurring the lines between our world and whatever's out there. So after Rust tangled with Errol Childress in Season 1's finale, he wasn't exactly throwing a victory party. He was hung up on the fact that some cultists were still out there doing their thing. Remember Louisiana Senator Edwin Tootle? He played it cool and denied any ties to Childress's nasty business, letting the Tootle clan keep on keeping on. In Night Country, Pete also revealed that Salal's cash flow comes from a shell company linked to the Tootle United. Seems like the Tootles haven't just survived since Rust and Marty wrapped up their 2012 case, they've thrived. Now, what if Rust, haunted by his past demons, has rolled back into Alaska like he did back in the 2000s? And what if he's on some vigilante mission to wipe out the darkness spread by the Tootles? Given the twisted road he was on in Season 1, it's not too wild to think his Carcosa run-in might have flipped his switch in a bad way. But do I really think Rust is the bad guy in our current mystery? Nah, don't want to steer the convo into wild guesses about Matthew McConaughey popping up when we should be digging into the gold that is this standalone story. Still, Night Country is kinda nudging us to connect these dots. Ennis residents are a complicated bunch. Alright, so shifting a bunch of dudes frozen together like a human popsicle pyramid is a headache and a half. Conley's caught between a rock and a hard place. Either he's the dude who exiled Liz to the sticks of Ennis, or he's the one who bumped her up to chief of a place That's anything but normal. He's itching to get this case up to Anchorage, but the rule book says that they've got to thaw the bodies first to keep the evidence intact, which was a legal loophole Danvers found to keep Conley from taking away her case. I guess this was the only issue with the episode. We don't really need a detective in the usual police politics tropes. Anyway, Danvers suggests using the town's ice rink as a makeshift mega fridge. To pull this off, Liz needs a favor from Kate McKitterick, a big shot at the mining company that owns half of Ennis, including the rink. And Liz has a history with Kate's ex-husband, Conley. Yep, things are awkward. Liz's love life could basically be its own show. She's got a past with pretty much everyone. The high school geology teacher Adam, her on-again, off-again fleeing Conley, and of course, there was Jake, her daughter Leah's dad. And speaking of Conley, their latest hookup is more nightmare-fueled and romantic. They were trading threats instead of sweet nothings. So between our secret meetups, Liz, with a little help from Pete and Navarro, is trying to piece together this crazy puzzle about the Salal crew and the bizarre night they ended up. Well, we're not sure. Were they killed? Did they just wander into the ice? It's a head-scratcher. One clue they've got is Dr. Lund, found with his freaky spiral symbol on his forehead. Rose tells Navarro that his symbol's been around way longer than Ennis itself. And get this, Navarro's seen it before, inked on Annie K's skin. Just a reminder, Annie K was the victim of a brutal murder whose case Navarro was looking into but could never solve. She was also one of the star protesters of the mine at Ennis. Now, the early crack at forensic evidence isn't exactly hitting home runs. They find a full handprint of one of the dead guy's boots, but it's a dead end. No match in the system. Plus, finding a handprint on a boot doesn't exactly scream guilty of herding dudes into a frozen wasteland. Then there's the money trail. Salal's being bankrolled by an NGO, but tracing it back just leads to a shell company. Where is Clark? Not many folks in Ennis have been up close and personal with the Salal station, but Liz gets the lowdown from the cleaning crew who swings by there twice a month. These are mostly Inupiat women, the same ones caught up in that mess at a crab plant in the first episode. Even the local teacher, Adam, calls the scientists at Salal a bunch of madmen. The picture these ladies paint of the Salal crew is not exactly rosy. Dr. Lund comes off as a real piece of work, all snappy and obsessed with perfection, barely even acknowledging the cleaners unless he's griping about their work. Then there's Clark, a total loner, often found crying alone in his room while everyone else just ignored him. And about Annie and her spiral tattoo, these women haven't seen hide nor hair of her at the station. Pete, on the other hand, gets a bit more dirt from the supply dude who first noticed Salal had gone ghost town. According to him, the Salal scientists were a quirky bunch from the get-go, but Clark had recently cranked up the weirdness by often strutting around in the buff and mumbling to himself. And guess what? This delivery man had also seen that creepy spiral symbol inked right on Clark's chest. Seems like those spirals from the previous True Detective seasons are making a comeback. Now, the Tootle cult worshipped Carcosa and the Yellow King, and their method of worship was mostly through the sexual torture of young children. It all boils down to Annie K. Navarro was still on the case, poking around Annie's cold file. She shows Annie's brother a pic of Raymond Clark at Kavik's bar, but no dice. However, one of his minor buddies does. This dude, Chuck, big fan of the K-pop band IVE since he's got their poster and everything, reveals that Clark bought an old trailer from his cousin way back. Navarro might be new at this, but she's got the same hunch as Liz. She knows that the case can only be solved by asking the smart and right questions. But she senses there's more weird stuff going down in Ennis. Meanwhile, Rose gets all mystical and cryptic about ghosts and specters, and we learn that Navarro's got her own issues with the past. In one of the scenes, we see a memory of Navarro in which she and her sister are petrified before their mother, who seems to be possessed. Interestingly, while driving, she also finds her mom's crucifix, which she quickly chucks out of her car, but she knows some things like the dead can't just be outrun. Now, several of the residents of Ennis are seeing things from their past. In one of the scenes, Liz sees visions of her son with Jake while the Twist and Shout by the Beatles was playing in the background, which explains her hatred for the song in the first episode. But it also hints that there's something wrong with the town that's making people go down memory lanes. Is it the water that has turned black once again? In fact, the next episode will show that the residents of Ennis have taken to the streets to protest against the mines. Anyway, Liz, after seeing a photo of Clark and his protester girlfriend, connects the dots between the Salal mess and Annie's unsolved murder. She swings by Navarro's cabin and reveals that the tongue they found was Annie's, and casually helps with the groceries like they're old pals. By the end of episode 2, Liz's personal life is a hot mess. Hank can't stand her, Kate and Adam are on the hate train too, and Conley has his own doubts. Then there's Leia, her stepdaughter, whose latest act of teen rebellion is sporting a temporary Inuit tattoo. Leia's got zero love for Liz, who's totally missing the mark with her. Instead of getting why Leia's hanging out with someone else's grandma for company, Liz thinks Leia's just out to give her a hard time. And let's not forget Kayla and her grandma. They're not Liz fans either. It seems that Pete is the only one not on the hate list yet, but things are looking shaky. Liz is keeping Navarro at a distance too. They definitely have had something fishy in the past about someone named Wheeler, which Liz Danvers wants hush-hush. Navarro, for all her toughness, shows a softer side. Meanwhile, Liz is home alone, poring over Raymond Clark's crazy notes from Salal and sees some seriously weird stuff in there. It seemed like a few pages of the notes had been written by someone who was not really in their senses, and there was the same stuff about some female entity. Things like, she can hear me, she's awake, etc. Interestingly, one of the scribblings seems like humanoid eyes. But they could also be a vague depiction of Earth's magnetic field, which could be the reason why the Caribou committed mass suicide at the beginning of the first episode. However, before Liz could explore more, she gets a call from Navarro. Doodles and dolls. Navarro manages to find her way to the RV park called the Nuke and finds the trailer Clark bought for Chuck's cousin. They initially thought that Clark got the truck to make love to Annie Kay, however stepping inside was like diving headfirst into Clark's chaotic brain. The place is a hot mess of doodles and scribbles just like his notebooks. But it gets weirder. Navarro and Liz find animal bones everywhere, creepy dolls hanging around, and guess what? Annie's phone was also present there along with this eerie life-size doll covered in Annie's clothes. And yep, there's that freaky spiral pattern. The same one from Annie's back and Clark's chest, drawn all over the ceiling. Is this joint an altar, a crime scene, or both? And what the heck made Clark lose it so bad? But here's the twist, it's not about what Clark did, it's about what he's still capable of doing. The gang regroups at the rink where they find out that Clark's body isn't in the giant corpsicle. He's still out there, roaming the same icy wilderness he's been obsessed with. Interestingly, in the third season of the show, a character named Montgomery deduces that the straw dolls are a sign of pedophile groups, like the Crooked Spiral. So is Clark a part of the cult from season 1? What started as a missing persons case with a hint of murder has now turned into a full-blown manhunt in the endless polar night. The time's all messed up with a non-stop darkness outside. It could be early morning or midday when Liz and Navarro find out Clark's still on the loose, but either way, they're gearing up for what feels like either the end of a super long day or the start of another endless night.
If you enjoyed this video, click on the like button and comment below about which other movie reviews you would want to watch. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.